Thank you so much for joining us for this SAG-AFTRA Foundation conversation at home with the half of it. I'm Jenelle Riley. I'm an editor at Variety, and I'm so pleased to welcome the artist who brought this wonderful film, now available on Netflix, to life. So please join me in welcoming writer-director Alice Wu and stars Leah Lewis, Daniel Diemer, and Alexxis Lemire. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. I'm going to be saying this a lot, but I absolutely love this movie. And something I've seen people on Twitter echoing is that they wish they'd had this movie when they were teenagers. This is primarily an audience of SAG actors who watch us. So I always kind of like to start by asking the actors, how did you get your SAG card?
I got my SAG card after doing a couple jobs. The first one being a pilot for Disney when I was like 12 years old. And that was just such a cool moment to be able to get that. And especially at such a young age, I guess I never was really able to process how cool that was, but it was really exciting. And that's how I got my SAG card.
Did you know what it meant? It sounds like you did, but you knew what that meant at the age of 12?
I knew that it was now a moment of, wow, like I'm actually getting to do this, and I actually have this opportunity to possibly maybe explore other things. And I guess because I was young, I didn't really understand all of that, but it was a very exciting moment that my mother and I were just like really thrilled about and grateful for.
Daniel, for you?
Well, this was actually my first performance in the United States. So I got my Canadian version of that with the ACTRA back in like 2018 for a Facebook show called Sacred Lies with the producers of True Blood. So that was very, very recent. But this is my first one in the U.S.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. So the Canadian version, what is it called?
It's just called, we have UBCP, which is for the province of British Columbia, and then ACTRA, which is like the Canadian kind of guild, just very, very similar to SAG-AFTRA in that regard.
That's so cool. Did you sort of know what it meant, what SAG-AFTRA was out here?
Oh yeah. I definitely had a great idea of that. Pretty much every Canadian's actor's dream is to get into the United States right now. There's so much production over here, and also most of the producers that actually produce in Canada are based in LA and New York. So it was a huge deal for me to be able to work on something like this over here.
I was going to say, I feel like most American productions are moving to Canada, so our dream is to get there.
Yeah, I think it definitely helps that I have the Canadian citizenship, but it was a bit of a process to be able to get the visa down here in the first place.
Wow. Alexxis, what about you?
Oh. I'm trying to remember, right, 2000, maybe 16. I'm trying to remember if it was after a Disney show I did, or if it was after this film called Truth or Dare that I did. But I just remember getting the letter in the mail, and my mom and I were so stoked. I remember calling my agent. He's like, yeah, that's what happens. I'm like, I know, but it's so exciting. But yeah, I think I was maybe 18 at the time, 18 or 19. So I was kind of in that middle where I wasn't like, super young. So I kind of knew kind of how exciting it was. But yeah, that's kind of my memory of it.
You get a lot of mail, but you also get a lot of screeners, which is awesome.
Yes. Mom and I love those.
That makes the dues worth it. And Alice, for you, you have such an interesting story about how you kind of became a filmmaker. Your previous film, Saving Face, was also a wonderful rom-com that features an Asian American lead, but you never set out to be a filmmaker. You started in tech, correct?
I did. I don't think it ever, like if you told me in high school I would someday be doing anything in the arts, let alone directing, I would never have. You might as well have said like aliens are coming down from space to take us away. Like that would be equally probable. So yeah, I was a computer scientist through my 20s. Then I wrote Saving Face in a night class. Long story short, moved to Brooklyn to figure out how to make it. And then 5 years later that got made.
Wow. I want to tell everyone to check out Saving Face after you see this movie, because you'll see some of the same DNA. It's such a wonderful movie. But what interested you in wanting to tell this story, the half of it?
Yeah, I think I'm basically someone who tends to write from a very sort of personal, emotional place. And honestly, with both these films, because I was writing them for myself to direct, there were both at times in my life where, because I'd left the industry 10 years ago and didn't think I was coming back. And so when I started writing this a few years ago, it was again a situation where I didn't think this film would necessarily get made, and probably it would not. So I could sort of write anything I wanted. And I think I tend to write from a place of, it's my way of understanding the world and maybe understanding how I really feel about a particularly thorny problem. And in this case, it was maybe the fact that, I think we live in a society that really exalts romantic love as sort of the most important thing. Like once you find that person, your life's complete, right? And I think maybe up until the age of 25 or 27, that kind of makes sense. But once you get past those ages, even if you do find your perfect partner, right? Or I think you start to realize, well, your life doesn't actually end, more happens. And so for many years, I think in the back of my head, I was just thinking about what are all those other relationships? And if I'm really thinking about it, like some of the heartbreaks I've had over, say, friendships starting to lose some of their intimacy, whether someone moves away or, someone enters a relationship and becomes less available, or like some of my, the family bond you have, some of the heartbreaks I have over that are often worse than the ones I've had over a relationship, right? Like, and if you date someone and you break up, even if it was like 6 weeks, your friends are all like, oh my God, are you okay? It's like, right? But if you're like, yeah, I feel like this best friend and I, we just don't talk as much anymore. I mean, people are like, yeah, that's sad, but it's not like there's an obvious grieving process that everyone acknowledges. So I think these are all the thoughts in my head as I started to work on this film.
And it has sort of a Cyrano de Bergerac inspiration. I don't know how heavily you leaned on that or if it was even conscious, because it's so original in its own way.
Oh, yes. No, it very deliberately was. So I started thinking about that, but and then the process of thinking, well, I kind of want to write about the nature of love. At a certain point, I thought I should set this in high school, mainly because I think high school, every feeling you have is so intense. It's the first time you've had it. So you start to think it's the last time you're going to have that feeling, right? So in the space of a movie, which is only 90 to 100 minutes, you can cover a lot of emotional territory very quickly. And so in that, once I was like, okay, set it in high school, I thought about myself in high school, and I was painfully shy. I could never have asked anyone out, not only because I was I was not out to myself as gay, but I think even if it had been okay to be gay, I don't think I'd be someone who'd know how to ask somebody out. And I suspect that's a situation a lot of us find ourselves in, even if you're straight, right? And there's something I think about the Cyrano story that allows you to like have this wonderful, like there's an ability to connect with the person that you're so, like you have this deep crush on, but to do it in this very safe way, right? Like in the film, Ellie basically uses Paul as almost like her puppet to like connect with the object of her affection, right? Like that's how it starts. But then I think the twist becomes how it doesn't turn out to be. Like the relationships that end up being important and how they end up growing between these three are not the way you would expect. So that's where I think it ends up subverting that original plot line.
And for the actors, I'm curious how the project found its way to you and what your reaction sort of was when you read it, because good roles aren't always easy to come by. And I think it's even harder for younger actors. And here you have 3 great roles. How did, what was your response when you first heard about it or read the script? We can start with Leah.
So when I first just even got the audition, like any other audition would just come to me like in my inbox. Just even the log line, I remember it saying, shy, introverted Ellie Chu helped jock Paul woo the girl that they both secretly love. And just that last little part kind of rung out to me. And I was like, I've never really heard that kind of story be told before. And then as I started to read the script, it was like every new trial or situation that these characters had to go through just kind of popped out of the page. And I feel like I could really feel Alice paint this world that was so vivid and so meaningful in so many different ways. I was immediately hooked with it. And then I just went into audition for it. And I kind of came in with what I thought my interpretation of the script would be, which I feel like my interpretation, Ellie was a bit more self-assured and a little more just out there, energetic, a little more upbeat. And when I got to talk to Alice about it, her and I started to get to know each other and share each other's experiences, and she got to know who I was. And then we started talking about Ellie, and she was able to help me find similarities that were actually a bit more quiet and introverted and internal for Leah and Ellie. And I feel like that was just a really, really cool experience. Before I'd even booked Ellie, she was already helping me try to create this character that she had envisioned. So that was really cool.
And Daniel, what about for you? What was your take on Paul?
I mean, very, very, I just want to piggyback on what Leah was saying. It really was this, as soon as I got the script, where I was just struck by how human all the characters were. I think I've said in multiple interviews that it really was a character that I'd been looking for probably 2-3 years at that point. A character that was both athletic but also just really layered. I'd come across a lot of characters that were very much surface level, and even though the stories were beautiful, the characters didn't jump out to me as something that I could personally connect to, and it was something that I would have to try and create. And so here there's this beautifully fully fleshed human being that I could just jump into, and for me that was such a gift. I mean, I got really lucky with my managers seeing the audition. Nobody asked me to tape for it. They sent it in over to New York with Rory Bergman, and she kind of connected me with Alice, and likewise, we got a Skype for an hour in my small apartment at the time. And I mean, I remember just going over it all with her and what the character's like, where I came from. And even before like there was any like really deep interest or I guess for me, I had no idea if I was being taken seriously. She was so invested in me and in that process. And that was just really, really special from the beginning. I never had that even close to that before.
And Alexxis, I'm so in love with Astrid as a character, because I feel in other retellings of Cyrano, that character sort of gets short shrift. And here she's so interesting and layered, and she gets to be more than just the object of affection. What did you sort of think when you read the script?
Really, the first time I read the script, I actually got really teary-eyed. I kind of cried the first time I read it. I just thought it was so beautiful. But what really grabbed me was Astrid's character. You know, being Latinx, it's been really kind of a hard journey for me in the sense of, you know, I've gone out for a lot of roles that I've even had connections to those, but you know, I would go in and it would be, you know, either I was, you know, not Latin looking enough, or you know, the role spoke, you know, fluent Spanish, and I'm not fluent in Spanish. And you know, when I read this, I just remember feeling so delighted that it was something that I connected so well with, but also that Alice was so specific in what she wanted to hire, and I felt so included for once in this industry. And I just remember reading about how kind of thoughtful she was, and it wasn't this stereotypical pretty popular girl who was mean. She had, you know, so many layers to her, and that's what really jumped out at me. And when I read the script, I knew I had to be a part of the project. And I originally was supposed to tape for it, and I just remember calling my team up and being like, I need to get in the room. So yeah, that was really my experience, and I'm just so grateful for Alice to have written such a beautiful character that, frankly, I feel was tailored for me.
Well, you talking about that specificity, Alice, I believe you said that you looked at something like 500 to 600 actors for every one of these roles.
Yeah, I saw so many tapes, like you wouldn't believe, because I'm in New York, right? So everything is taped and sent to me. And then very few people would I pull and be like, okay, let's go see them again. And for each of these roles, I mean, because I wanted fresh faces, right? For a film like this, I think it does make a difference if you believe these characters exist versus, oh, look, there's that person that you saw on this TV show, right? And I think each of these actors, I literally like could not have found better people. Like with each of them, I was like, because, you know, you're looking, and I do think for a film like this, there's some things you can get away with. Like you can, if you weren't able to get that shot that you needed, or, you know, oh, that location fell through. But a film like this, the number one thing is to get the right actors. Like, honestly, if you cast the right actors and they have the right chemistry, I think the film works. And so these three, and what's wonderful about them is not only are they incredibly talented, they also, they're incredible people, but the chemistry they have also built, both first as the characters and then that have now bled into them as like just friends and people, I think is really the heart of the film. And I think it's what people are responding to when they're watching it, because they're actually watching real emotions happening and real relationships.
I'm so curious about that chemistry because it's hard to make chemistry happen, and in this film in particular, it works. Everyone has chemistry with each other. Did you guys do chemistry reads? Did you meet each other in the audition process?
We did do chemistry reads. I remember doing, and I didn't even know that I had booked Ellie at all. These were just kind of like shot. These were just kind of like dark auditions with other people that I was like, oh, I hope this really works. And I remember the first one was with Daniel, and it was just, I mean, we had really great conversations before we had even gone into the audition together, just getting to know each other. And it was really great when we just did it for Alice. And then also with Alexxis, the moment I met her and I went in so deep. Within 10 minutes, it was like, oh, tell me about your family. Tell me about your sister. Like, tell me about this person. And when we went in for the casting director, Alice, it was just like, oh no, Leslie. We were just having so much fun. And I had just met this girl like 10 minutes ago. And it was just like, that continued on all through filming, just the bond strengthening between me and them, and those two also as well. Like, they're quite literally like two of my best friends now.
So you guys just sort of met like outside the audition room?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Daniel, I keep wanting to call you Paul. Forgive me because you're so good in the movie. But I sort of wanted to pick back up on that. I'm imagining this chemistry continued to build because the three of you were shooting in like sort of this not typical Hollywood location. You were in a small town, weren't you?
Yeah, we were all staying in this hotel up in Nyack in New York, and so it was really like we didn't know anybody there at all. We were an hour and a half from the city, so it wasn't like we were exploring too much, especially with like some of the long shoot days. So we'd spend the entire weekends together exploring a little bit, and we'd go to the gyms together. I mean, I think there's a lot of activities that we did together, but it all really stemmed just from the personal connecting. I mean, I think that there was something that clicked right away, and I mean, so much of that I think is just due to luck, and also Alice and just putting together a group of people that she saw had that potential to really connect in those ways, and I mean it just ended up turning into something where the relationships that we had were really reflected on screen in a very, very similar way to how we were in real life.
I'm sorry, Alexxis, I hate to make anyone repeat themselves, but I love what you were saying, and now we're getting such a good visual.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, no, it looks really good, actually. Perfect background, go figure. Would you mind sort of repeating what you said about the audition and the chemistry with when you first went in for it?
Yeah, I remember when I was first going in for it, I'd originally gotten a self-tape, and I had told my team, like, I need to get in this room, and I ended up showing up. I knew I was kind of late in the process. I started having a conversation with Leah, and they already had gone through a set of chemistry reads, but we went outside before going in to the chemistry read, and we just talked about our legitimate, like, deepest, darkest secrets. Like, I have never had that right off the bat connection with anybody before. We just really hit it off right off the bat. Like there was no forcing it. It was just, you know, we were so on target. And, I remember walking in the room and we started, and even the casting director, Leslie Wu, she was just so excited when we started reading. She ended up pulling out some props so that we could kind of, feel more comfortable. And Leah and I, we ended up doing that hot spring scene, and it was just so comfortable. I've never done a scene like that with somebody in a chemistry read where it was just, it was so easy flowing. And with Daniel, we had met the first time actually in New York, and right off the bat connection there too. And we really just kind of got lucky that it was just that easy, you know, and really making connections nowadays is a lot harder. You know, you're on your phone a lot more, you're making connections more so, you know, through Instagram and Twitter, and to just find these real life connections and then have them turn out to be some of your closest friends is just such a wonderful experience.
When you said she pulled out props, what kind of props was she pulling out?
So actually, there was this confession scene. We didn't end up using it in the film, but there was this confession scene that really was supposed to just be my scene. But Leslie was like, "Let's play around." So she found this like cardboard box to kind of put between us and make it seem like we were both in the confessional, and Ellie was on the other side. And so I started kind of reading my monologue, and she got both of us on camera and had Leah doing the reactions to hearing my monologue. And I just remember finishing up the monologue, and Leslie was almost jumping for joy. She just loved our connection. She could see our connection. We were joking around in the room between takes, and yeah, it was such a wonderful audition experience. I've never experienced anything like that before.
That's so nice to hear, because you hear so many audition stories where actors go in and the casting director isn't even seeming to pay attention. You know? And so for someone to be so invested is really refreshing to hear.
Yeah, it was really cool. I think what really grabbed her was Leah and I's connection right off the bat. And so to see us, you know, have that in the scenes and in real life, and both of us just flow through these scenes, I think it was just a really exciting experience for her too. You know, it's hard to find those connections between actors, especially right off the bat like that.
And Alice, because we have so many actors who are watching us, I'm curious, is there any advice you could offer them coming into that room? Is there something you would want them to know, things that you like, things that you don't like? You know, so it's actually funny. Some casting directors really don't like props, so you just never know. I love that this CD really liked it and busted some out.
Yeah. So I'll be honest. I've never wanted to be an actor, and the idea of being in front of a camera is terrifying. So I actually always feel so much for actors. Like, the idea of having to go to audition sounds horrible to me. And so what I would say is that I honestly, as long as the actor is just not an asshole and they're coming in and they're just trying to do their best, that's all I want, right? Like, they may not be right for the role. Like, the vast majority of people are not going to be right for the role. That doesn't mean that they're a bad actor. In this specific case, I was so specific about what I wanted. I'm sure you guys all remembered, well, I guess I flew out to LA twice, but otherwise I was always on a Skype call or something. I was Skype directing, right? But even then, for me, I feel, well, I don't know. I honestly think that they probably should teach clinics to directors for auditions more than they need to teach clinics to actors for auditions, because I actually think that you're asking actors to do something incredibly vulnerable, something I couldn't do, right? So I always think my job is to make the space, like, create the best conditions possible for the actor to do their work. So for me, like, I always make sure I pull actors aside to talk about things, not like have a big conversation so everyone's listening in, because it's like, if I'm sitting there, I don't want like everyone discussing my script notes all amongst themselves. For me as a writer, I'd rather people, right? And so it's similar. It's like so I don't know. I guess I think you go be yourself, do the best you can. And if they didn't like it, well, then screw them. That's what I would say.
Sort of speaking to the same topic for the actors, how do you sort of deal with the audition process? I mean, rejection is hard, and they tell you not to take it personally, but I know that's difficult, especially at a young age.
Well, you know, most of the auditions that you go out for, and depending how many you do go out for, it's not always the match. I mean, if that were the case, all of us would be brimming with joy and working every single day of our lives and living on an island and having a happy life sailing the wind. But that's definitely not the case. But, the work that we end up putting in to create these roles, I feel like is also just as gratifying, and that's something to really pay attention to when maybe you don't get the role or you're very, very close to getting the role. And understanding, I guess, that it's not something that you really have to take personally. And I think every person at one point will find a role that is right for them, and they will have their time. And it's not always going to look like what other people's time look like as well. Everyone has their own unique path and journey in the way that they approach and find characters and then end up being able to perform characters. And I don't know, I feel like staying in the community as well, like being a supportive to your fellow actors and your friends in this wild business as well. My friends and my family have helped me a lot through facing not necessarily rejections, but things that might not be right for me as Leah or an actress or this time at the moment. Yeah.
I think personally for me, I got really lucky with having an athletic background where it's just like losses are a part of your daily life. And there's days where you don't score any goals or the coach is yelling at you because you're just like not doing the work that you need to be doing. And it really helped me when I kind of transitioned into this field where it really was just making sure that, hey, this is part of the process. Like, it's not like Leah said, not everything's meant for you, and that's completely okay. I think the hardest part about it is when you're just starting out and then you don't know when the next job's going to come or if the first job's going to come and if you're right for this industry. Because then it's a lot more self-doubt around who you are and around if you have the right talent for it rather than if it's really a personal thing about just you and when you know that you're kind of like doing the right thing consistently. So I think that made it a lot more hard when I was just starting out. But then it kind of transitioned and just like discussing it with family and friends and acting coaches of mine and trying to focus on less of a results kind of focused life and more on just focusing on the work. And if I could go into an audition every time, connect with the reader as much as humanly possible and really prep as much as I can and then just be proud of the work that I did, then all of a sudden my mental health kind of increased dramatically, and just like how happy I was, how excited I was for auditions. And it put a lot less pressure on me to be like, hey, let's make a lot of money right now, or let's get the job right now, or let's prove to them that I am this, when there was auditions when I knew I wasn't meant for that. Like it was like for this really small bullied kid, and I'm like, I'm 6'4". The bully that they've hired is 6 foot. It's just not going to work on screen. That's okay. So let's just go in there and connect with the work as much as I can, and then let it go, and be ready for the next one if it's more right for me later on.
Alexxis?
To be frank, I have definitely had my share of meltdowns, where especially when you get super close to a project, and you're right there, and you're in the final three, or you're in the final haul, and it's like it doesn't work out. And then you have all these thoughts. You're like, I don't know if this is right for me, and then you start to really get down on yourself. And to say that I haven't had those moments would absolutely be a lie. But I definitely think what is important is definitely continuing to remember that it definitely isn't personal. Sometimes it is just the fact that you're just not right for the role, or somebody else was more right than you were. It really is the name of the game. And it's important to remember you are human. You're going to have your moments where things are just going to feel like they're impossible. But I had one of those meltdowns before I had booked the half of it. And, auditioning for something like this where I finally understood what it meant to have something that was 100% right for you and meant for you. And those projects are out there. So for anybody feeling that way and feeling like they're struggling and they're ready to give up, like I promise, just keep pushing a little bit harder and it's going to come. And what's meant to be for you will be for you. And I truly, truly, truly believe in that. As long as you put in the hard work, that project is out there for you.
Maybe because you guys are so good at all your jobs, but this movie looks like it was really fun to make. I definitely want that Hot Springs is going to turn into a tourist attraction in no time, I have a feeling.
It will not, because we had to create it.
I wondered. Oh my God, that's amazing.
We couldn't afford. I mean, for one thing, I couldn't put 2 actors in the water for that many hours and have it be cold. It needed to be like, they would have been freezing if it was an actual watering hole. So, and if it was an actual hot springs, then there'd be all sorts of issues with fog and noise. So,
well, they should recreate it like at the Netflix headquarters. And
it's probably happening now, like as we speak. It's probably, they're like, oh, it did well today. It's probably, there's a whole wing being built probably that looks like your Colt and like so I don't know. I don't know if they're listening in, but that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I am curious, however, all roles are challenging in their own ways. For each of you, what ended up being the biggest challenge? Was there a scene that you sort of struggled with? Alice, for you, from a technical or even emotional standpoint, when you're writing the script? Most people, I think, who are watching this have probably seen the movie at this point, so feel free to get spoilery if you want.
Ooh.
So, well, what comes to mind is this. It's funny, maybe because I was just listening to them talk about their relationships. So it was very intentional. So I had rehearsal. I had them for a couple of weeks before we were starting to shoot, because I must have rehearsal before, even if it's just a few sessions. And most of it is one-on-one with the actors. Like even before they come out here, we're on Skype, we're talking about the character. I want to get to know them as people, and I want them to, because a lot of it is, that's the moment the actor decides if they trust you, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's like, otherwise, if they don't trust you, now they have to, while they're acting, watch themselves to be like, am I any good? So you're trying to build a relationship over time where they start to be like, okay, I trust that this person cares about me, but I also trust that they will pull me back if I've gone past the brink, right? Because if they don't think you're going to do that, then they're going to have to rope themselves in. So a lot of that is happening. But then when they got there, very deliberately, I had rehearsal between Leah and Daniel for Ellie and Paul's characters, because I wanted to build their relationship, but I very deliberately did not have rehearsal between Aster, the Alexxis's character, of anyone, because she's not so, like, they're supposed to be so nervous around her, right? So there is no need to build a relationship. The more awkward it is, the better, right? Like and so those are all the sorts of things you think about in terms of how you grow that. And then the scene, I always, I knew, if this scene works, I have a movie. If this scene doesn't work, I don't have a movie, is the very last scene of the movie, which is, I always knew, because I think a lot about first shot, last shot for your main characters. Like, what is the first shot you see of them? What is the last shot you see of them, right? So for Ellie's character, the first time we see her, her back is to us. Like you see a part of her, and then and so it says the half of it, but we see her back half. The last shot of the movie literally is just her face, and we're just holding on it for the longest time, right? And in that, you see all the emotions go through, and then eventually she looks like she finally just sees that beat of confidence, and she just has a direct eye line, which is nowhere in the film. Like, that's the only time Ellie Chu has that, and that's really her emotional arc through the film. But to get there, to get her to cry for the first time, all of that in a way that felt meaningful, with Ellie and Paul, Daniel and Leah's one of their first rehearsals, I always had them stand apart from each other and do this listening exercise where they're not allowed to speak. They have to just stand, and it's very hard to do, where you just have to maintain eye contact, and you literally have to continuously but be real about it. No mugging. The moment someone is mugging, it's like, nope. What are you feeling now? And then I'd be like, okay, you say what you're feeling. You say what you're feeling. Okay, describe this person's face. Tell me what you like about it. Tell me, and you're trying to get them to the place where they're starting to say real things. I don't know, the smile looks kind of sinister, right? Because at first everyone wants to be nice. Great. You want to get past that. You want to get to the place where everyone is actually being real, right? And so I'd have them do that exercise just so they'd take each other in. But also in the back of my head, I knew that the day we're shooting the Ellie Paul goodbye scene, which is the last scene of the film, I took the two of them into a room, and it was just it was just the three of us, and I had them stand across from each other in the same exercise. And I basically made them look at each other. And this time it was so different. How in the first time they were so who is this person? This time you could just see, they were looking at each other, and there was so much genuine warmth without speaking. And then I started asking them, okay, look at this person. remember the first time you met them. Think about, you know, what you thought of them then. And they both start just like laughing. And then think about like what this person means to you now. Think about, you know, how this, and I was deliberately saying, not as your character, I was saying as Leah and Daniel, like, think about like what this person has meant to you. Think about how they've changed your life. And then I was like, think, what is one thing you wish for this person's life? Right. And they're both like crying. Like, it's just, they're just looking at each other, just like crying. So I'm trying not to cry because I'm like, okay, I'm trying to like, so then I took them aside separately. And when I asked Daniel, so what did you want for Leah? Is it okay if I say Daniel?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Daniel said, like, he's like crying like this. And he's like, I just want her to know that she is enough exactly as she is, that she doesn't have to be anything more, you know? And it's like so heartfelt, but I was like, oh, so I hung on to that. So and then we went out and we shot their goodbye scene, right? Like their goodbye scene, which they knock out of the ballpark. And then when we shot the train scene where Leah, like we're on Leah's face and she like turns back, like, so we have to do that scene. So I always do one take where I just let them do, because I want them to get it out. So it's like, I don't say anything, like, let's just do it so you can get whatever out. And I remember it's like, we do the take and Leah's like, I don't know. I'm not feeling it. I'm like, why would you feel it? It's super weird. You've got a camera in your face. Like, you know, we're like going back and we're just talking. And we're like, oh, by the way, it's like, by the way, Daniel happened to say to me, for you. I was like, you know what Daniel said to me? And I ended up telling her, and she just like, and then it was like, we're shooting the scene now. And so that moment when she turns back, like that, those are real tears. Like that scene, like is real for like when she's like looking back and like she's crying. It's from that moment of like having just heard what Daniel said about her. And then, so I don't know that
tearing up even now. Leah.
Yeah, but I was so lucky that I have actors that like, because it's a risk, right? Because the other, like, what if Daniel didn't say what he said? What if Leah was not as talented as to be able to like take that in and then like show it to us, right? Like, it's a freaking risk. But so that's that. But literally, it's like, if we can get that scene, I have a movie. If we cannot get that scene, I don't have a movie. And so, yeah,
that's amazing. And for the actors, I mean, there's a lot of stuff, especially in the last third of the movie, that I think is really tough either to go through, or, you know, Paul says some things that are pretty harsh from a place of love and caring, but it's still heartbreaking.
Yeah, definitely. I think there was a huge part there where it really was just trying to take the moment to heart in so many different ways, and really to listen to Alice. I mean, she guided me through that just beautifully. And I think I was really scared about that scene for a lot of different reasons. And I mean, obviously, like Alexxis said, Leah and I had such an incredible connection. So and when you dive into it, there is like these personal feelings that affect how you're saying things and what you just said and how it impacts you in the moment, and trying to push that away and take on what Paul is feeling in all these different ways. And so it was really complex in the moment, just personally. And I think without these two and the patients and I mean, even Alexxis at the time, because she was there for those scenes, and just being in the moment with each other as much as possible. It was emotionally exhausting. It was one of our longest days, I mean, at least remembering back, and to be able to have that support through that, it was incredible, because it really was this, like you said, very, very harsh moment where it was like this, it's breaking her heart, it's breaking Paul's heart. I mean, obviously, Astra's getting affected by this hugely as well, trying to piece everything together. And yeah, just, I think, again, just shows like really Alice's kind of heart with all of that, with how it kind of turned out, where it really was still this moment where you do tell that it still is coming from this place of care. He doesn't hate her for this, but he hates the moment, and trying so hard to wrap his head around this, and where his heart's kind of conflicting with everything he's been told. And so yeah, just really thankful for her with that scene, and of course with just so many moments in that movie.
And it also sort of leads to probably one of my favorite moments of the movie, when your mother, when Paul's mother tells him that she's okay if he's gay.
Yeah.
And then she's like, okay, thank God he's not, but you're not changing the recipe.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Alice was great in that moment where she's like, "Hey, Catherine, could you please like don't hit him so hard?" I'm like, "No,
We
hit
could
him."
not get her to stop hitting him. She was really, really invested. It was like, I was like screaming over the thing, like, "Okay, cut." And she's just like, whacking him. And I had to pull Paul aside. I'm sorry, Daniel aside and be like, "Are you okay?" And he was like laughing. He's like, "Yeah," but I'm like, man, it was like, yeah, it was a little scary.
And Alexxis and Leah, for you guys, what ended up being the most challenging part?
I think one of the most challenging parts for Ellie specifically was me as Leah fighting against instinct and also really being able to produce Ellie naturally without the instincts of Leah, who might be a little older than Ellie and a little more straightforward and has a completely different lifestyle. But Alice was always really, really good at helping me find my way back to the core of Ellie. And though it was a bit of a struggle, it was a really, really amazing learning process, and just seeing what the relationship between the actor and director can be like if, kind of what Alice was saying earlier, the trust is there. Being able to trust that when Alice says this or suggests this, that there is so much truth behind that, and you can go with that and be completely okay with kind of embodying the moment and embodying everything else that the other actor is doing. And with struggle, there was always so much privilege to get to work with these actors, because even though these difficult scenes are so intricate and so weaved with emotions, I feel like working with Daniel and Alexxis, they always met me more than halfway. It was just a complete collaboration of everyone being vulnerable and open and willing to go there with Alice, with each other. And because of that, it was a really beautiful experience rather than being kind of hard.
And Alexxis, for you?
I think for me, definitely this scene, that I think I struggled with most. I think there were two that definitely stand out to me that I struggled with most. And I think it was, one was the church scene. I think there was just so much going on and trying to, wrap my head around all the emotions and then the realizations and just everything kind of going on. I think I struggled with that a little bit. Just because there was just so much happening around me. I had just gotten proposed to, and then 5 minutes later, Daniel's standing up, and I'm still angry at them because I just saw him kissing Ellie, and then Ellie stands up, and then she starts talking, and then I realize that, she says something that resonates with me, and then I figure it out, and then I just have kind of the realization, but then I had the anger start to bubble up in me as well. I think that one was a little tough. It was definitely one of the tougher scenes as opposed to, the hot spring scene where it was just, we were there and, it was an audition scene and we were just so comfortable. And then I think another tough scene definitely was Ellie and Esther's last scene where she's apologizing. I think it was tough, and I was coming to terms with trying to say what I was feeling without saying it, and then having her standing in front of me and processing all these emotions. I'm still angry and I'm still hurt, but I she expresses saying, it's not like the thought never crossed my mind, and I can barely look at her, not only because she had done these things that really hurt me, but it was also like I'm coming to terms with a lot of these different emotions that I've never felt before, and I'm trying to process those as well. And that was tough too, because we were actually really kind of far apart. It was almost hard to hear each other during that scene, which was definitely, and it was raining. So there was so many aspects also going on with that it was just there was just a lot. So that was tough. And then Aster-wise, meeting the character, I think that was a little bit luckily easier for me, only because I think I am like Aster in so many ways. We think a lot alike in real life. I think what was hard was being on set with Leah, we are supposed to kind of have this beautiful connection, but it's still kind of shy. And Leah and I are not like that as friends in real life. I mean, we are wild together. It was almost to the point where we kind of had to sometimes take a step back and be like, okay, we need to take a second because we're being a lot right now, and we need to focus and kind of get that Aster Ellie energy back into play. So that was kind of tough, and almost having to kind of isolate myself, because I think Aster feels very isolated in the sense of nobody understanding her, and then she's making these connections with Paul and Ellie, but they're still over the phone, and you know, they still have this weird shy energy. So it was definitely navigating those friendships, but also knowing when to take a step back and say, okay, let's really buckle down and focus and get where we need to be character-wise. And then we'd get back to the hotel and I'd be like, I love you guys! And, you know, I'd be, you know, all over them, like white on rice, stalking their life. But I think that was a little bit of a struggle for me.
Well, I would love to talk to you guys about this movie more, but I know you have a very busy day today because it's now available on Netflix and everyone can see it and watch it over and over again. But I want to thank you guys so much for taking the time to talk to all of us. Congratulations on a beautiful movie, and have a great day.
Thank you so much,
Jenelle, for everything, truly.